The Table, the Donkey, and the Cudgel from Brothers Grimm. There was once upon a time a tailor who had 3 sons and only 1 goat. As the goat supported the whole of them with her milk, she was obliged to have good food and be taken every day to pasture. The sons therefore did this in turn. Once the eldest took her to the churchyard, where the finest herbs were to be found, and let her eat and run about there. At night, when it was time to go home, he asked, "Goat, have you had enough?" The goat answered, "I have eaten so much, not a leaf more I'll touch. Meh." "Come home, then," said the youth, and took hold of the cord around her neck, led her into the stable, and tied her up securely. "Well," said the old tailor, "has the goat had as much food as she ought?" "Oh," answered the son, "she's eaten so much, not a leaf more she'll touch." But the father wished to satisfy himself, and went down to the stable, stroked the animal, and asked, "Goat, are you satisfied?" The goat answered, "With what should I be satisfied? Among the graves I leapt about, and found no food so wet without. Meh." "What do I hear?" cried the tailor, and ran upstairs and said to the youth, "Hello, liar! You said the goat had had enough, but you've let her go hungry." In his anger he took the yard measure from the wall and drove him out with blows. The next day was the turn of the second son, who looked for a place in the fence of the garden where nothing but good herbs grew. The goat cleared them all off. At night, when he wanted to go home, he asked, "Goat, are you satisfied?" And the goat answered, "I have eaten so much, not a leaf more I'll touch. Meh." "Come home, then," said the youth, and led her home and tied her up in the stable. "Well," said the old tailor, "has she had as much food as she ought?" "Oh," said the son, "she's eaten so much, not a leaf more she'll touch." The tailor would not rely on this, but went down to the stable and said, "Goat, have you had enough?" And the goat answered, "With what should I be satisfied? Among the graves I leapt about, and found no food so went without. Meh." "The godless wretch!" cried the tailor, "to let such a good animal go hungry." And he ran up and drove the youth out of doors with the yard measure. Now came the turn of the third son, who wanted to do the thing well, and sought out bushes with fine leaves, and let the goat devour them. In the evening, when he wanted to go home, he said, "Goat, have you had enough?" And the goat answered, "I have eaten so much, not a leaf more I'll touch. Meh." "Come home, then," said the youth, and led her into the stable and tied her up. "Well," said the old tailor, "has the goat had a proper amount of food?" "She has eaten so much, not a leaf more she'll touch." The tailor did not trust his son, but went down and asked, "Goat, have you had enough?" And the wicked beast answered, "With what should I be satisfied? Among the graves I leapt about, and found no leaves, so went without. Meh." "What a brood of liars!" cried the tailor. "Each is wicked and forgetful of his duty as the other. Ye shall no longer make a fool of me." And quite beside himself with anger, he ran upstairs and belaboured the poor young fellow so vigorously with the yard measure that he sprang right out of the house. The old tailor was now alone with his goat. Next morning he went down to the stable, caressed the goat, and said, "Come, my dear little animal, I myself shall take you to feed." He took her by the rope and conducted her to green hedges and amongst milfoil and whatever else goats like to eat. "There you may once eat to your heart's content," he said to her, and let her browse till evening. And then he asked, "Goat, are you satisfied?" She replied, "I have eaten so much, not a leaf more I'll touch. Meh." "Come home, then," said the tailor, and led her into the stable and tied her fast. When he was going away, he turned round again and said, "Goat, are you quite satisfied for once?" But the goat did not behave any better to him, and cried, "With what should I be satisfied? Among the graves I leaped about, and found no leaves, so went without. Meh." When the tailor had heard that, he was shocked, and saw clearly he had driven away his 3 sons without cause. "You ungrateful creature," cried he, "it is not enough to drive you forth. I will mark you so that you will no more dare to show yourself amongst honest tailors." In great haste he ran upstairs, fetched his razor, lathered the goat's head, and shaved her as clean as the palm of his hand. As the yard measure would be too good for her, he brought the horsewhip, and gave her such cuts with it that she ran away with mighty leaps. When the tailor was thus left alone in his house, he fell back into great grief, and would gladly have had his sons return again, but none knew whither they had gone. The eldest had apprenticed himself to a joiner, and learned industriously and unweariedly, and when the time came for him to go on his travels, his master presented him with a little table which had no unusual appearance and was made of common wood. But it had a good property. If anyone put it down and said, "Little table, set thyself," the good little table was at once covered with a clean little cloth, and a plate was there with a knife and fork beside it, and dishes with boiled meats and roasted meats, as many as there was room for, and a great glass of red wine shone so that it made the heart glad. The young journeyman thought, "With this you have enough for your whole life." Then he went joyously about the world, and never troubled himself whether an inn was good or bad, or if anything was to be found in it or not. When it suited him, he did not enter an inn at all, but either on the plain, a wood, a meadow, or wherever he fancied, he took his little table off his back, set it down before him, and said, "Little table, set thyself." Then everything appeared that his heart desired. At length he took it into his head to go back to his father, whose anger would now be appeased, and would willingly receive him with his wishing-table. It came to pass that on his way home he arrived one evening at an inn that was filled with guests. They bade him welcome and invited him to sit with them, for otherwise he would have difficulty in getting anything. "Oh, no," said the joiner, "I will not take the few bites out of your mouths. Rather than that, you shall be my guests." They laughed and thought he was joking. He, however, placed his wooden little table in the middle of the room and said, "Little table, set thyself." Instantly it was covered with food, so good the host could never procure it, and the smell of it arose pleasantly to the noses of the guests. "Fall to, dear friends," said the joiner. And so the guests, when they saw that he meant it, did not need to be asked twice, but drew near, pulled out their knives, and attacked it valiantly. And what surprised them most was that when a dish became empty, a full one would instantly take its place. The innkeeper stood in one corner and watched the doings. He did not know what to say, but thought I could easily find a use for such a cook as that in my kitchen. The joiner and his comrades made merry until late into the night. At length they lay down to sleep, and the young apprentice went to bed and set his magic table against the wall. The host's thoughts, however, let him have no rest. It occurred to him there was a little old table in his lumber room that looked just like the apprentice's, and he brought it out quite softly and exchanged it for the wishing table. Next morning the joiner paid for his bed, took up his table, never thinking he had a false one, and went his way. At midday he reached his father, who received him with great joy. "Well, my dear son, what have you learned?" said he to him. "Father, I have become a joiner." "A good trade," said the old man, "but what have you brought back with you from your apprenticeship?" "Father, this is the best thing which I have brought back with me. It's a little table." The tailor examined it on all sides and said, "You did not make a masterpiece when you made that. It is a bad old table, my son." "But it is a table that furnishes itself," said the son. "When I put it down and tell it to set itself, the most beautiful dishes stand on it, and a wine which also gladdens the heart. Invite all our relations and friends. They shall refresh and enjoy themselves for once, and the table will give them all they require." When the company was assembled, he put his table into the middle of the room and said, "Little table, set thyself." But the little table did not bestir itself, and remained as bare as any other table which did not understand language. Then the poor apprentice became aware that his table had been changed, and was ashamed at having to stand there like that. The relations, however, mocked him, and were forced to go home without having eaten or drunk. The father brought out his patches and began to tailor again, but the son went to a master in his craft. The second son had gone to a miller and apprenticed himself to him. When his years were over, the master said, "You've conducted yourself so well, I give you a donkey of a peculiar kind, which neither draws a cart nor carries a sack." "To what use is he put, then?" said the young apprentice. "He lets gold drop from his mouth," answered the miller. "If you set him on a cloth and say, 'Bricklebrit,' the good animal will drop gold pieces for you." "That's a fine thing," said the apprentice, and thanked his master and went out into the world. When he had need of gold, he had only to say, "Bricklebrit," to his donkey, and it rained gold pieces, and he had nothing to do but pick them up off the ground. Wheresoever he went, the best of everything was good enough for him, the dearer the better, for he had a full purse. When he looked about the world for some time, he thought, "You must seek out your father. If you go to him with the gold donkey, he will forget his anger, and receive you well." So it came to pass that he reached the same public house in which his brother's table had been exchanged. He led his donkey by the bridle, and the host was about to take the animal from him to tie him up. But the young apprentice said, "Don't trouble yourself. I will take my grey horse into the stable and tie him up for myself, for I know where he stands." This struck the host as odd, and he thought that a man who was forced to look after his donkey himself could not have much to spend. But when the stranger put his hand into his pocket and brought out 2 gold pieces, and said he was to provide something good for him, the host opened his eyes wide and ran and sought out the best he could very well muster. After dinner the guest asked what he owed. The host did not see why he should not double the reckoning, and said the apprentice must give him 2 more gold pieces. He felt in his pocket, but his gold was just at an end, and he said, "Wait an instant, sir host, I will go and fetch some money." But he took the tablecloth with him. The host could not imagine what this could mean, and being curious, stole after him, and as the guest bolted the stable door, he peeped through a knot-hole. The stranger spread out the cloth under the animal, and cried, "Bricklebrit!" Immediately the piece began to let gold pieces fall, so that it fairly rained down money on the ground. "My word," said the host, "ducats are quickly coined there. A purse like that is not amiss." The guest paid his score and went to bed, but in the night the host stole into the stable, led away the master of the mint, and tied up another donkey in his place. Early the next morning the apprentice went away with the donkey and thought he had his gold donkey. At midday he reached his father, who rejoiced to see him again and gladly took him in. "What have you made of yourself, my son?" he asked. "A miller, dear father," the son replied. "What have you brought back with you from your travels?" "Nothing else but a donkey." "There are donkeys enough here," said the father. "I would rather have had a good goat." "Yes," said the son, "but it is no common donkey, but a gold donkey. When I say Bricklebrit, the good beast opens its mouth and drops a whole sheet full of gold pieces. Summon our relations hither, I shall make them rich folk." "That suits me well," said the tailor, "for then I shall have no need to torment myself longer with the needle." And he ran out and called the relations together. As soon as they were assembled, the miller bade them make way, spread out his cloth, and brought the donkey into the room. "Now watch," said he, and cried, "Bricklebrit!" But no gold pieces fell, and it was clear that the animal knew nothing of the art, for every donkey does not attain such perfection. Then the poor miller pulled a long face, saw he was betrayed, and begged pardon of the relatives, who went home as poor as they came. There was no help for it but the old man to betake him to his needle once more, and the youth hired himself out to a miller. The third brother apprenticed himself to a turner, and as that is a skilled labor, he was the longest in learning. His brothers, however, told him in a letter how badly things had gone with them, and how the innkeeper cheated them of their beautiful wishing gifts on the last evening before they came home. When the turner had served his time and had to set out on his travels, he had connected himself so well his master presented him with the sack, and said there was a cudgel in it. "I can put on the sack," said he, "and it may be of good service to me, but why should the cudgel be in it? It makes it only heavy." "I shall tell you why," said the master. "If anyone has done anything to injure you, do but say, 'Cudgel out of the sack,' and the cudgel will leap forth among the people and play such a dance on their backs they will not be able to stir for a week, and it will not leave off till you say, 'Cudgel into the sack.'" The apprentice thanked him, put the sack on his back, and when anyone came too near him and wished to attack him, he said, "Cudgel out of the sack," and instantly the cudgel would spring out, dust the coat or jacket on their backs of one after the other, and never stop till it had stripped it off. And it was done so quickly, before anyone was aware, it was already his own turn. In the evening the young turner reached the inn where his brothers had been cheated. He laid his sack on the table before him and began to talk of the wonderful things he had seen in the world. "Yes," he said, "people may easily find a little table which will cover itself, a golden donkey, and things of that kind, extremely good things which I by no means despise, but these are nothing in comparison with the treasure which I have won for myself, and am carrying about with me in my sack." The innkeeper pricked up his ears. "What in the world can it be?" he thought. "The sack must be filled with nothing but jewels. I ought to get them cheap, too, for all good things go in threes." When it was time for sleep, the guest stretched himself out on the bench and laid his sack beneath him for a pillow. When the innkeeper thought his guest was lying in a sound sleep, he went to him and pushed and pulled quite gently and carefully at the sack to see if he could draw it away and lay another in its place. The turner had, however, been waiting for this a long time, and just as the innkeeper was about to give a hearty tug, he cried, "Cudgel out of the sack!" Instantly the little cudgel came forth and fell on the innkeeper and gave him a sound thrashing. The host cried for mercy, but the louder he cried, the more heavily the cudgel beat time on his back, until at last he fell to the ground exhausted. Then the turner said, "If you do not give back the table that sits itself and the gold donkey, the dance will begin afresh." "Oh no," said the host, quite humbly. "I will gladly bring out everything, but only make the cursed kobold creep back into the sack." Then said the apprentice, "I will let mercy take the place of justice, but we will beware of getting into mischief again." And he cried, "Cudgel into the sack," and let him have rest. Next morning the turner went home to his father with the wishing table and gold donkey. The tailor rejoiced when he saw him once more, and asked him likewise what he had learned in foreign parts. "Dear father," said he, "I have become a turner." "A skilled trade," said the father. "What have you brought back with you from your travels?" "A precious thing, dear father," said the son, "a cudgel in a sack." "What?" said the father, "a cudgel? Well, that's worth your trouble. From every tree you can cut one for yourself." "Oh, not one like this, father. If I say cudgel out of the sack, it springs out and leads anyone who means ill by me a weary dance, and never stops until he lies on the ground and prays for fair weather. Look you, with this cudgel I have got back the wishing table and the gold donkey which the thievish innkeeper took away from my brothers. Let them both be sent for, and invite our kinsmen. I will give them to eat and to drink, and will fill their pockets with gold into the bargain." The old tailor would not quite believe, but nevertheless he somehow got the relatives together. Then the turner spread a cloth in the room and led the gold donkey in, and said to his brother, "Brother, speak to him." The miller said, "Bricklebrit," and instantly the gold pieces fell like a thunder shower, and the donkey did not stop until every one of them had so much he could carry no more. I can see in your face you would have liked to be there. Then the turner brought the little table, and said, "Dear brother, speak to it." And scarcely had the carpenter said, "Little table, set thyself," then it was spread and covered with the most exquisite dishes, and such a meal took place as the good tailor had never yet known in his house. The whole party of kinsmen stayed together till far in the night, and were merry and glad. Personally, I would have liked to have been there. The tailor locked away needle and thread, yard measure and gooses in a press, and lived with his 3 sons in joy and splendor. What, however, has become of the goat? Who was to blame for the tailor driving out his 3 sons? That I shall tell you. She was ashamed she had a bald head, and ran to a fox's hole and crept into it. When the fox came home, he was met by 2 great eyes shining out of the darkness, and was terrified and ran away. A bear met him, and as the fox looked quite disturbed, he said, "What is the matter with you, brother fox? Why do you look like that?" "Ah," said Redskin, "a fierce beast is in my cave, and stared at me with its fiery eyes." "We will soon drive him out," said the bear, and went with him to the cave and looked in. But when he saw the fiery eyes, fear seized him likewise. He would not have anything to do with the furious beast, and took to his heels. The bee met him, and as she saw he was ill at ease, said, "Bear, you are pulling a very pitiful face. What has become of all your jollity?" "It is all very well for you to talk," said the bear. "A furious beast with staring eyes is in Redskin's house, and we can't drive him out." The bee said, "Bear, I pity you. I am a poor weak creature whom you would not turn aside to look at, but I believe I could help you." She flew into the fox's cave, lighted on the goat's clean-shaved head, and stung her so hard that she sprang up, crying, "Meh!" and ran forth into the world like mad, and to this hour, no one knows where she's gone. The end.
Thank you for enjoying this story with me. I hope to see you next time.